Many times people email me asking certain kinds of questions that maybe they've been inspired by the videos they've seen of me or the blog posts. Or they bring up other subjects that I haven't totally discussed in these videos or posts, but they know that I would probably have some idea about them or ideas. For example, composition. I think many people know that I've written a lot of music, and this particular person, named Andrew Coleman, hope that's the right pronunciation, Andrew, asked me about composition and actually sent me about 12 questions that he wanted to know if I would respond to. So I'm going to respond to them. And I've been thinking about how to respond to them, since my style is to take a long time on a particular question. I don't know if I can answer 12 questions in one video. I could give short answers, or take the time with something and make several videos. So I'm thinking this will be video 1 in a video series called The Frequency Bone Composition Connection. And we'll see how many videos will be in this series. Now, Andrew's first question is this. He first puts a simple question. Why do you write music? Well, the first thing I notice is the way Andrew put a simple question. It is simple, in a sense. I could say, Andrew, the reason why I write music is because I want to express what's in me about music. I could also say, I write music at this point in time, and I think ever since I started really getting into it, really prolifically, I would say 22 years ago now, that I write music as a means of connection to the things I want to discover, know about, or get closer to, and draw more of what that is into myself, to build a greater relationship with the things I want to have deep relationships with, or as a means to want to understand something better. If you have to write about something, you have to get to know about it. And how you get to know about that can happen in many, many different ways. For example, I'll give an example of a piece I wrote. I'll give a couple of examples. One time I was commissioned to write a piece for Joe Alessi called Arctic Emanations. I think it's on his Turn of the Century CD. And I thought about Joe, from what I know about him, and our relationship we've had over the years, and all different aspects in my mind coming in. Had a phone call with him about it. And with that, my wife, I was wanting to write something maybe about the moon and the different phases of the moon. And then I was talking with my wife, who's totally brilliant and perceptive and everything. And she said, "What about the Arctic?" And I thought, oh man, that's great. Similar to moon-like things, but very, very different. Obviously, Earth on the Earth. And there's so many things that go with the Arctic. So many different things. Most people have never heard of the Arctic poppy. This incredible little plant, this flower, that comes through this ice and snow. And so, when tuning into the Arctic, for example, I watched videos because I've flown over it before, or no. Maybe. We're close to it. But I've never actually been there. And so I was projecting everything I knew about it, whether I saw pictures in books or videos. I just wasn't watching these things. I was trying to tune into them. And my compositions are definitely based in tuning. In fact, people might not put the word tuning when they're trying to focus in on something, but that's exactly what's happening. They're trying to get on the wavelength or the frequency of that particular something, whether it be a plant, whether it be a human quality, whether it be a star, whether it be something in the ocean, whether it be the Arctic. In this case, the Arctic. And it has a lot of different considerations that would go into it to get one tuned into it so you can feel the Arctic without being there. And I wasn't going to start anything until I could feel it, until I thought it, or had thoughts in my mind that were Arctic. And can feel what it would be like to be there as best as I could without being there. And this is where you have to blast away any preconceived notion about something. So composition, you want something to come through you and right through you. In a way, I wanted the life of the Arctic to flow through me. Now, if the piece were not for trombone and piano, but let's say for violin and orchestra, different aspects of the Arctic might come through. So interesting, I think we have an instinct that says, oh, I got this to work with and this to work with. And I'm going to write something about the Arctic. How are we going to find the Arctic in the language and medium of with a trombone and piano? If I want to write about the aurora borealis, or the Arctic poppy, or these incredible icebergs smashing into each other, or some Arctic birds. I mean, and seasonal changes there. I have to do it within the tools that I have, which in this case were trombone and a piano. I think it's a successful piece that way. Now, the thing is, maybe I'm going beyond why I write music. And I should look, maybe this is automatically going into his second question, which is, what is the typical genesis of a piece? Is there no typical path? What have been some of your experiences with creating and developing pieces? Well, I think I just described one. And so I find a territory to connect to. It could be a human quality. It could be something about two people. It could be something about a time in history. It could be a place like the Arctic, or a place that I've personally been to. It could be about something that isn't even from this planet, like the sun, for example. Anything. Think of all the incredible inspiration we have from nature alone. It's infinite. So, let me tell you about this other piece that took an interesting development. Because all of them are different. Some might take longer, some might take shorter. But I know when I'm ready to give birth. And in this particular case, I was on tour with the BSO. I can't remember what year it was. I think it was 97. 97, 98, something like that. And my wife and I were having dinner with Jacques Zoon, who was the principal flutist of the Boston Symphony then, for a few years. Terrific artist. Made his own flute, something out of wood. It's just really unusual and so natural. And I was thinking I'd like to write him something. So I asked him. I said, you know, Jacques, is there anything in nature that you really love? And he started to talk about this place in Provence. And there was this house, and there was the evergreen trees, and there was the bees. And the way he was talking, it was so connected and real that I could smell the lavender fields. It was that vivid. You could feel the warmth of the temperature he was talking about. And the bees, and the whole interplay that he witnessed and loved in that land with nature. And immediately as he started talking, I felt like someone was, you know, like on a windshield, where someone in the wintertime or something, and I guess it doesn't have to be winter, but you go, you blow some hot air on it, especially if it's a cold surface, and it gets, you see the steam, and then it starts to bead up, depending on the temperature. And it starts to, from the steam, form a liquid. And so I felt that on my forehead, so to speak. I'm just trying to describe what happened to me the best way I can. And it happened to my wife as well. And she went back to the room that night and wrote an incredible poem about the fields of wild lavender. And it captured the naturalness, the richness, and the simplicity, and the beauty of nature in a relatively short, but such a connective poem, that for the next almost 9 months, speaking of giving birth, that every now and then I would read, and then I would leave it, and read it a month later, and leave it. And maybe a few months would go by, and I'd read it, and I'd reconnect to my own feelings and thoughts with it. And then, it was really about 9 months later, I felt, it's time. And I started to write this piece in the place of wild lavender, I think. It's called For Flute, Horn, and Cello, which was, it actually eventually was world premiered outside of Tanglewood, but in the Berkshires by Jacques and his wife, terrific cellist, and Jamie Somerville, French horn. And when I started to write this, all these different things about the nature of the land was coming in. And then all of a sudden, something strange happened. Really, really odd. And I thought, what is going on here? And because all of a sudden I'm writing something that didn't seem to fit with this beautiful land, or the poem, or the story, the living story Jacques told. And I said, this sounds like a disturbed children's school. But I let myself keep going, and then all of a sudden, it changed to this mysterious, to me sounded like a castle, like an old ancient castle. And I stopped and I said, wait a minute, this is getting away from what I really wanted to write about. And so I went to him. I said, Jacques, I'm in the middle of writing this piece. But look, all of a sudden, this strange feeling like I'm writing about disturbed children or something. Is there a school nearby? And his face almost went. He said, well, just a little bit down the road, there is a school for special needs or children that are emotionally, need special attention. And I went, okay, where's the castle? And he went, in the other direction, a few kilometers, a friend of mine bought an old castle, and we frequent it very often. He's looking at me, and I go, got it. I know what I'm doing. Okay, thank you very much, I said. And I went back and I took out those things. And the reason why I took that out is because I understand a principle called the tuning fork principle, or the principle of sympathetic resonance. Like when you go up to a piano and you hold down the pedal and hold down a note, someone comes into the room and plays a note, that note, the piano is going to sing the note back to them. You don't even need to do that with the piano. Sometimes we're practicing whatever instrument we're practicing, and a light fixture might buzz our pitch back to us, or a music stand, or some other thing in the room. And that's because that other thing is on the frequency we're on, and it's humming that frequency back to us. And that is one of the deeper aspects of composition. And so I was picking up everything in that district. And what I just wanted to write about was Jacques' story that he told us, and my wife captured in this poem. So I took out the part with the school and the castle and went on to just make sure I was connecting to the smell of the lavender and the sun coming in and the trees and the bees. And people really enjoyed it and said they felt that aspect of nature. So I know a lot of people when they're composing are searching for ideas, but it depends on how fine-tuned you get and how deep you get, and let yourself cook on that territory, that certain things will come. And guess what? Certain things you might not want to be in there, especially if you want to focus on presenting something. That was given to you And in this way, through this beautiful speaking, like poetry coming out of Jacques about his place in Provence. Now, I know that sounds a little science fiction. Welcome to my world. But it's not. It's science. It's called sympathetic resonance. So different pieces will do different things, and I will go down different paths for different pieces. They don't all emerge the same way. Sometimes something comes in an immediate little piece of a few notes, and I go, wow. And then realizing, wow, that little piece of that puzzle that was just chucked at me goes near the end of the piece. And so sometimes it's like someone just throwing me bits and pieces. Even if I'm connecting to something specific, I might just get a bit of it. Because part of me that's maybe blocked from taking on the fuller frequency of something needs to be smoothed out in order to let something else in. So those are two questions, and hope you find this interesting, since it's already over 20 minutes. And I think this will be video 1, and maybe I'll start from the second question the next time again, and go on and see if I can add another 1 or 2 in there. Ends video 1 of Frequency Bone Composition Connection series.